is there's obviously the real democratization of this. My mom is using GPT chat. Probably everyone's parents have like heard you guys talk about GPT chat. So that's the real exciting thing, that like this is not like you're not a AI. Some deep techs are, but like most companies aren't like the AI startup. It's that they're using certain technology within their existing platform, as we saw really neat ideas in the last company. So I think that's like the big change between now and like 10 years ago. But the scary part is none of us know where this is going, and we are going very, very fast in this potentially this.
We'll get to fear later. Okay. Let's focus on optimism right now. We'll end with
dark.
Fear and little optimism. Leigh Marie, let's hear a little bit from you. Like, for example, this is one thing, we were talking before, this panel, this is one thing that every investor that I've been talking to is pumped beyond pumped about investing in this. $4.5 billion poured into this area last year alone. And I'm curious, how much of this is just like the next big thing because crypto is down and we're in a recession and a lot of other things have gone to shit, and how much of this is real and has staying power?
Totally. I think this is kind of a question on everybody's minds. I think what's really interesting about the pace, like if we feel like it's much faster, and I think I always have to look back, I probably Google this, I don't know, once every month because I just can't believe it. But like deep learning as we know it is like about 10 years old. Like, so AlexNet, which was kind of the first deep learning neural network to win a very popular computer vision contest, happened in 2012. And then Transformers, which is the thing that's behind a lot of this sort of recent tech developments, GPT, all of that, 2017. So I do think that there is some credence that things are actually, the pace is getting much faster than, let's say, like 20 years ago or something like that. And what's so exciting about this wave is there's just so clearly like applications that we see, and even my parents who are in rural Alabama see, like people in Alabama are using ChatGPT to write eulogies. Like, that's insane. So there's sort of this ubiquity, there's clear tech developments that are happening, but then at the same time as an investor, you have to be pretty careful about, okay, is this a cool demo, or does this create a sustainable business? Is there a way to create a moat? Is there a way to create a differentiated company? And I mean, I think there are even though we are quite early in this, there are multiple examples of businesses making lots and lots of money with AI right now. And so, I mean, that's definitely a good signal that it's creating some amount of value, and I think it's our jobs as investors and as technologists to figure out, what's the hype, and then what has staying power.
Right. Shawn, now you running a fund of funds, so you're investing in other, VC funds that invest specifically in AI. That's one of your verticals. What are you seeing among those VCs that are doing that? You must get a pretty interesting cross-section.
Yeah, I think there's some really interesting trends that align with what Leigh Marie was talking about. I think one really interesting opportunity is in the intersection of AI and the creator economy, specifically media content generation and the like. One of the fund leads for one of the funds we've invested into in the AI space called Metropolis, Ed Sachi, actually threw the very first AI Films Festival. And I attended that, and of course it was very rudimentary films. These aren't blowing your mind, they're not gonna win any Oscars anytime soon, but you can clearly see the future there. And that type of technology, whether it's stable diffusion or other forms of technology which help improve the operations and editing and generation process of films, is going to become ubiquitous and used across the industry. I think that's one area we're particularly excited by. And I think that's where maybe there might not be a lot of differentiation in that any specific startup, but as you start to see those startups gain more and more traction, start to win awards, similar to how a lot of these streaming platforms are winning awards against the major Hollywood players. I think that's...
Can you give us an example of something that's rocking your world?
Something that's wrong?
Rocking. We'll get to wrong later.
No. If I was investing into this space, I would really look for companies that were, one, creating a remote, and like, two, solving real world problems. And one of the ways that, for me, what it's really exciting is like solving an actual problem that people have. I love like playing with Midjourney or whatever at like midnight, but like I'm just playing with it. when we talk to real big, enterprises, they have workflows that are very established, that are structured, that whatever new tool comes in has to fit within that workflow. And so I think that what's really exciting is that you now have very traditional companies that are embedding these AI components into existing workflows that they have. And I think that's the piece for me that is really exciting, is that this isn't just something on the outside. I love the creator economy, but as a B2B SaaS company, I like finding those existing workflows, major problems that this could help with.
Leigh Marie is nodding her head right there. Do you want to add on to that, or are there some applications that you see as super promising?
Totally. I think my aha moment, this wasn't in the last 3 months, this was more in the past year. But I was just catching with one of my portfolio companies, I think at the beginning of last year. And I don't know, I kind of mentioned offhand, oh, this Copilot thing, have you heard of it? It's probably really basic, right? And he's like, no, my entire engineering team is using it to code. And this is a group of extremely experienced engineers. And I was just shocked. How is this not just a beginner programming tool? How is this already intelligent enough to be helping some of the best engineers that I know? And he basically said, yeah, if they threatened to take it away, because this was back in the beta free period, if they threatened to take it away, we'd pay thousands of dollars per person. This makes us so much more efficient, and our time is worth that as extremely senior engineers. And so I was like, wow. So I mean, the first area, I think, and those comments point to it, probably a lot of developer tooling can get a lot smarter. So not just sort of let's autocomplete the code in the IDE, but let's do all the other rote work that developers have to do. Let's be able to read docs really quickly. Let's integrate into code review. Let's create testing automatically. So I think there's a lot of cool areas of dev tool automation. And then, I mean, kind of, referring to some comments that you guys said previously, there should be a Copilot for everything. And I think sometimes that's a compelling argument for a startup, and then sometimes that's a compelling value prop for an incumbent to capture a lot more value. So I think, part of the job here is figuring out in what verticals will the incumbents just, or they already have the distribution, they'll just put this intelligence into their product and create a personalized, better, faster experience, or where is there some compelling argument for a startup to come in and say, hey, counter positioning, there's no way the incumbent's going to do this, it's going to eat all their business, or the incumbent's really old, they don't have the tech talent to integrate some of this in a clever way. So I think that's one of the things that I'm thinking about, but ultimately I can't wait to see what all the products are going to look like a few years from now.
Now, within those aha moments as an investor, I'm sure you see your fair share of, oh gosh, companies that maybe are AI in name only, because when you look at the whole market, we were talking a little bit about this, maybe a few, crypto to AI pivots. Talk to me a little bit about the fakers now that we've talked about the makers. Have you seen much where it's
Yes,
AI in name only? And wait, and I have a question. As someone that, okay, you're ready to take it away.
Spill the tea.
How do you splice that out?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of negative and cynical things you can say about a hype cycle that, attracts all these tourists, and, well, I was here before other people, and I was at Scale AI, and I know all about machine learning. But in actuality, I love that there's so much hype right now, because it means that a lot of smart people are now putting their sights on the problems and seeing all these solutions. And I just read this really great tweet, but basically one of the kind of simplest way to sum up this hype cycle is this technology, which was kind of created in 2017, is now accessible to developers generally. It's not just ML engineers. It's anybody who knows how to use JavaScript can integrate one of these things into their product. I mean, I think that's amazing. And so I think it's less about who's faking it. I think it's more about how much defensibility can you create in a product. And I don't think that needs to be, I train my own model, or it doesn't need to necessarily be, I have all this proprietary data, but it does need to be, I have something special and something that's ultimately going to be harder for others to copy, or something that's accumulating, or something like that. So yeah, I don't really like the sort of, oh, this is a wrapper discussion, or, oh, you're faking it. But I do think it's my job as an investor to figure out have you created something that when inevitably you start to do well and 10 copycats pop up, you're able to still be the winner?
Either of you want to add on to that?
Yeah, I think it is definitely hard to filter out the noise from the signal, especially in this market. I think there was definitely a series of different comments around YC startup trends. If you looked at summer 21 startups, they all pivoted into crypto, and then spring 23, they all pivoted into generative AI. Yes, that's true, but I think these are also some of the smartest builders out there, and they're trying to find value, like Leigh mentioned, and they are actually building value. And one of these startups will find product market fit and scale and become that next unicorn or owner of the market. I think it is inevitable. Who actually is going to drive that is always a question. I do want to say that there are some interesting links between crypto and AI, and I realize that crypto is relatively unpopular these days, but crypto also does a really good job of proving scarcity, proving provenance around ownership, especially in an age where AI creates infinite free creation opportunities. It's very hard to see what is real versus a scam. Similar to some of the builders out there who are building out viral tweet threads. But I think that as builders experience both technologies, they're going to see interesting links like that. And it's easy to dismiss a lot of these builders as they're faking it until they make it. They're just jumping on the hype train. But some of them are going to find out what's a product market fit, what's going to scale to a huge amount of users and create a lot of enterprise value. So that's my take.
One other part of that is, even if it is easy to make something, building a company is like, the product is very important in building a company. Maybe it's the most important thing, but there's so much other just grind that goes into it. Everyone here, almost everyone's hand went up when they were talking about being a founder. Like, that's the hard part. It's like dealing with like the wave after wave of bullshit that like comes your way, and yet like getting up and like facing the day. So it's, you know, you have friends that are like, I don't want to tell you my idea. So many ideas, like it doesn't matter, like, because it's just an idea. Like, unless you execute it and really like grind and work, it doesn't really matter. So that's, I will say that's like, to counter my point before, even if you could like recreate, or maybe the moat isn't technically as strong as it was before, or it's easy for like a small team to like produce something to compete, they still have to have the like to want to grind. And that's the thing that I think is a very meaningful moat. They have to build a great team. And so if you can do that, you're still in a really good spot.
I'm glad that you brought that up, because it doesn't just happen out of nowhere. There's a lot of grinding. You know, you get into this black box, and then, you don't just poof, out comes a company. There's a lot of things behind the scenes that occurs in building a market and finding the applications. And when we look forward to what our world is going to look like because of AI 10 years from now, you mentioned, people are using it to write eulogies. We heard about it being used for SaaS, and obviously in insurance and B2B and all these other markets. What are some areas that are, maybe you could categorize these, what would be the ultimate, I guess? What would be like a market that you're just salivating over as an investor or as a builder that would be phenomenal to nail with this technology?
I'm happy to go. So I'm personally quite passionate about the intersection of AI and biotechnology. I think we're starting to see some halo effects from a lot of the generative AI model development bleeding over into biotech and healthcare. Now, it doesn't fit the traditional model of generative AI, which requires relatively fault-tolerant workflows, using natural language, and other elements which are more attuned to the creator economy or consumer tech or consumer social. But I think 10 years from now, we are going to see more and more AI-designed drugs for hard-to-reach verticals within disease therapeutic areas, like rare diseases, like oncology, which has the worst clinical trial success rate of any therapeutic area, 3%, and many, many other applications. The reason I'm optimistic, and I was pessimistic for the last 10 years or so on AI and biotechnology, there was a lot of hype, but we saw some initial proof points. In December of this past year, we saw the largest acquisition of an AI-designed drug, a tyrosine kinase 2 inhibitor focused on treating psoriasis, was purchased by Takeda from a company called Nimbus Therapeutics for $4 billion after a successful phase 2 trial. Takeda is going to build a platform of autoimmune drugs on top of that. But that drug was initially developed with a company called Schrödinger, a 20 to 30-year-old ML quantum computing startup focused, public company now, focused on drug design. We're going to see more and more examples of that, particularly around small molecule and protein design, but also across the stack in biotech. Designing better and more efficient clinical trials. There's a company called Unlearn, which is trying to figure out how do we get these drugs out to patients faster with smaller patient populations that generate clinically significant data so that they can go to the FDA and get these drugs approved. There's going to be better distribution models. So I think that's what I'm really excited about is AI and biotech, all the scientific discoveries that can be compounded on this current technology. AlphaFold as well.
That's a tough sector to follow. I don't know. Either of you have a sector that you also feel passionately about, or that you think AI should be highly regulated in, which I realize is a different question, or perhaps hands off.
I mean, I guess I already touched on dev tools, which I mean, I'm biased because I used to be an engineer, and that was kind of my aha moment. And I think like a lot of these use cases, there's always some degree of tech risk, and I mean, I think that's kind of been proven out now with the success of Copilot. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, like, you know, I talked to so many, I mean, probably like 75% of the companies I'm meeting now are AI applications, and I've really just seen them across the gamut in terms of like the verticals that they're targeting. And so, I mean, I'm just kind of, I mean, broadly excited to see how it works out. I mean, I think you as a founder, and this is something that we just generally advise, but you know, you have superpowers, you have a special skill set, and you know, it's probably right for one particular application. And yeah, I mean, I'm like very just open to seeing this applied across different fields.
One area that I think is, well, a theme is that there are some industries that are just getting older. And they have a lot of people in them, and they are eagerly looking for efficiencies. Insurance just happens to be one of those ginormous industries where, I don't remember the exact number, but like 50% of everyone's over like 55 years old that works there, and they're gonna be retiring in the next couple years. So like, there just aren't people going into that sector, and yet it's a gargantuan industry. And so I think that's one of the areas where there's gonna be like real opportunity for lots and lots of companies to come in, and these large insurance companies are eagerly looking for AI applications.
We haven't talked much at all about some of the negatives, and there are a lot of concerns, perhaps some well-reasoned, some not, that AI is going to take people's jobs, that AI is going to, we're going to be working for these, you know, tech overlords, and we're going to be, you know, just the, you know, the humans just feeding the servers or something like that. How much of that is like sci-fi dystopian nonsense, and how much do you think is rooted in reality and deserves some careful guardrails as we move forward?
I'm happy to jump in again.
I mean, yeah, and you can go into specific sectors. Maybe if you want to talk about biotech, are there certain areas, are there certain concerns around the way that AI is applied in biotech that would be concerning? You know, we heard from Panjalib earlier, who was talking about making sure that the data training sets were bias-free and that they were correct to make sure that the AI delivered something that was
So
fair.
I'm much less concerned about biotech. There's a lot of safeguards built into the biotech development process whereby you're going to catch a lot of errors, and You have to go through long human trials to actually prove it out and actually get those drugs approved. I'm probably more concerned about things on, for example, the health insurance side. You hear about all these claims denials by insurance companies, and it's going to be easier and easier for them to actually implement these technologies and reduce the amount of payouts that they have, because that's ultimately what's going to prevent them from keeping a high MLR, medical loss ratio, which is a mark of their profitability. I'd be concerned about decisions around care, so directly in the clinic. Outside of healthcare, I would also be concerned about how this is implemented within government. I think government is probably going to be one of the last, I would say, bastions of holding out against AI. Not because government in general is tech averse. I think we as a society probably do not want robots or bots to determine how we are governed. That is antithetical to how we see, at least in democratic republics, how we see ourselves being governed. I do see that a lot of the military part of government is probably going to use a lot of AI, unfortunately, for better or worse. It's already out there in terms of autonomous drones. I unfortunately think that's a Pandora's box that we've opened that we can't put back in. It's become an arms race. I think we need to be really careful about what that implies. Now, does that mean AI is going to launch a series of nuclear weapons and cause a nuclear winter and wipe out humanity? Probably not, but it's going to mean more and more advanced technologies in the hands of the US and armed states that I won't name, who are our enemies as well, declared as our enemies, or strong competitors. So I think it's really important to understand where we put the guardrails in. I think it's particularly around areas which impact the equitability of scarce resources like healthcare, the potential deployment of violent means like military technologies, and the governance of our population.
It also just empowers a single individual to do something. Like the last, I forget, what was it, 2017, with the flash crash, where it was just computer code that thankfully there were some guardrails on it, but if you have individuals, I mean, I don't know, how many of you guys have gone into AutoGPT, and you tell it to do something, and it just starts doing it a lot, and then it does the thing that, I guess that should have happened afterwards, but I didn't ask that to happen. So there's this next step that just keeps working and grinding and grinding. So that's potentially a challenge where there could be some very unintended consequences of just individual actors going after something. If you're the 12-year-old, not the 12-year-old in the bathroom, in the basement, saying go do X or try to break into X, but that for me that's also a risk, because that's not insignificant.
Somebody's going to do the paperclip optimization problem, right? Somebody's going to make the whole world paperclips.
Right.
So the pace of it.
Yeah, the pace of it. I think there might also be what does it do to the way we think? So I've got an 8-year-old, and he's doing his first report. It's kind of a big deal. He's got to give a little presentation. And every one of us has been at that moment where you're looking at that blank piece of paper. He doesn't know how to take notes. He's never taken notes before. He's third grade, so you have to read something, comprehend it a little bit, and say I think that's important. And then you have to kind of organize that initial thought. Imagine if you never did that. What would that do to the way that you're able to analyze complex issues now? Maybe it wouldn't matter. Maybe you would only be focusing on really, start with that one level up. After all, we've also, all of you have probably used ChatGPT for something because we wanted to solve the blank page problem ourselves, and so we said, we're able to provide more analysis and therefore come up with a better product than maybe we would have without that. But I think that's potentially a real issue if you have the fundamental way people think. Now, obviously, I didn't give him ChatGPT to do his homework, but
He got it himself.
I did it. Anyway, I just feel that might be another issue that comes up over time.
The danger of the extinction of critical thinking?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a danger. Any other dangers?
I mean, I think we've touched on a few. Like, I think, it is clear that people can use this to become a lot more efficient. So there's a big question around labor displacement that I do think we'll have to face sooner rather than later. But then, and then there's like the fears of like, okay, well now we have this tool and so we forget how to do certain things, but I mean, I can't really spell because I always have spell checker. So there's like, there's plenty of examples of this happening in the past of us forgetting how to do things because we have something that helps us now. But then, I mean, it's challenging because it's like, so there's all these clear risks to let's move forward, let's progress. But then there's also, I think, a ton of, I mean, yes, of course, there's so many great companies to be built that we've already talked about. It's really exciting. But I guess maybe at a more serious level, like, especially with all this biotech stuff, if we continue to move faster and faster with technology, we save lives, right? Like, we are going to find new drugs, we're going to find new treatments, and we're like, if we say, okay, let's pause, let's slow down, theoretically, that's going to take longer and more people are going to die. And then also from like a national security perspective, we can talk about pausing, we can talk about regulation, and I do think those discussions are worth having. But then on the other hand, do you think that some other countries who are also developing AI very quickly, do you think they're having those conversations? Don't think that there was a 6-month letter from some other countries. I think we have to be comfortable with the idea. If we pause, if we stop, if we regulate, from like a national security perspective, we might fall behind in AI. And are we okay with the United States not being, number one in artificial intelligence? I would rather live in a world where we are. So I think, with all the risk, which are quite valid, and I do think there'll be like policy that addresses especially the first two things that I said. On the other hand, I'd be way more scared if we stopped progressing at the rate that we are.
I think we're getting to time here. I didn't know what time we got. Couple questions? Okay, great. Well, yeah. Isaiah?
Yeah.
Okay.
So if I think about like what is software, it's something that really, really cheaply allows us to embed like wisdom into the world. So like you have the right way of doing something in your head, you can super cheaply bake that into a product, and then millions of people now can do it the right way, right? How long is this going to take for that paradigm to be like almost zero cost, like almost like literally zero cost software? And then B, when that happens, does that mean we start doing the same thing with atoms, where it's like almost zero cost atom iteration? Like, am I going to be reading like lean skyscrapers? Like I build my, this part of the skyscraper this week and like test on people. Like, how long till we get there? Is that where we're going?
It's all you, buddy.
Flexible skyscrapers definitely sounds like an exciting future. I will say that the world of atoms, it's much harder to manipulate with AI, and I think many companies have tried it. They're making progress. We see it starting to penetrate the food services business, the latte serving robots in SFO airport, or the burger flipping robots and the like. Does that translate into infinite permutations of physical forms? I don't know if that's the case. I think it's going to become a lot easier for us to automate some of those physical actions. I think there's particular danger, especially when we automate software development, when it comes to checking code, the validity of code, the edge cases and the errors that are there. And I know testing is not a sexy topic, but I've tried multiple times to get ChatGPT and GPT-4 through APIs to create full stack applications. It is riddled with errors when you try to implement a Docker instance, Docker image, everything. Once you actually put it in production, it is full of errors. Now, you could argue that something like AutoGPT would be able to self-correct, but I think the danger of having too much reliance on GPT and AutoGPT and all of these different implementations of generative code is that we may fall asleep at the wheel of some of these latent errors and hidden issues and edge cases that plague the current world of software and that are just going to probably multiply 100x. And I would say that is actually an interesting area to build in a world of infinite code generation. And it's not the sexiest topic. I think it's perhaps a lot easier to test the physical manifestation of buildings, and you have architects and the like. But when you think about software, there are even the best TDD frameworks out there, test-driven development frameworks, unit testing, are not going to catch all of these errors that could potentially have huge dramatic economic and societal consequences. So that's my take.
That, by the way, that was the aha moment I had with AutoGPT. I told it to build a tiny little program, and then it kind of did that with errors, and then started to create workflows for testing that I didn't ask it to do that part, and it actually found some errors and started correcting them. So, but again, this was like a tiny little thing, and it didn't work without some human intervention.
We got another question right there. Lovely lady with the sunglasses.
Hi, my name is Leigh. I'm a founder of Star Global Group. So we mostly work with a lot of Chinese companies in the US. So one of the companies we work with is China's ChatGPT. They went public last year. So I'm curious about what do you think about the development in terms of China versus US? Because a few days ago, I was at Emerge when Eric Schmidt talked about China and US is almost like a competing and like that kind of relationship. But when I work with China's ChatGPT, they actually really love to explore the US collaborations, nothing like more like enemy. So like I'd love to hear your aspect. Another thing is that when I talk with those Chinese companies, they said that for AI, is actually they spend a lot of money, burn a lot of money in the beginning stage. Then it's very hard to commercialize and to generate revenue. So in the beginning stage. So how do you guys deal with situation that you need to burn a lot of money to do R&D before you actually can commercialize? Thank you.
So, competition with China, how's that going? And then cash burn.
Yeah, wow, what a question.
Softball.
We'll be here for the next hour. Drinks will be served all around. No. Take it away, Leigh Marie.
Yeah, I mean, like, I guess lots of things that I could say here. I mean, in general, with global tech, I mean, companies have global visions, and so whether you're a U.S. company, you're a Chinese company, but if you're building the same product and you're competing, ultimately you're competing for a global audience, and so, among companies, there is, of course, some collaboration, and I think ML in particular is really interesting because there is so much, because it's such a specialized skill set when you're actually at the model level, like you're building models or doing research, and there's so much, like I saw this when I was working with self-driving car companies at scale, people go between self-driving car companies, and a lot of information gets shared that way. People publish papers, and a lot of information gets shared that way. So in some ways, there is a collaborative component, but then at the same time, ultimately, if you're building companies, you're competing, and many, U.S. companies would like to sell in China. Frequently, they're banned. And many Chinese companies would like to sell in the United States, and I guess they're banned less. But that's kind of, I guess, my general take on that. And then the second part, I think, about the sort of, or I guess we might want to talk a little bit more about that first.
I think the question was around how to handle the vast amounts of cash burn that the early stage startups go through in this sector.
I mean, there's probably a lot of parallels to
Yeah.
biotech, actually. But yeah, it's a deep tech endeavor if you're training these massive models. And so I think what we've seen with a lot of U.S. foundation model companies is they've figured out ways to do BD or partnerships with companies that have a lot of money. So that they don't just have to rely upon traditional venture financing, but they can also sort of pair with a partner like OpenAI and Microsoft to take advantage of some of their resources, their distribution, and in return provide models and other things to Microsoft. So that's the pattern that I've been seeing a lot, and it's really tough because these models are super expensive to build if you are trying to build a state-of-the-art foundation model. What's cool is if you look at the generation before, so I'll say state-of-the-art, let's say GPT-4 for language. Generation before, GPT-3. It's way cheaper to train GPT-3 now than it was. I mean, there's a lot of different estimates, but I've seen anywhere from $500K to a few $1 million versus I think the original training was more than that. So we see the cost of things start to come down, but with each iteration of the model, costs more to train, and it's nice to have a sort of partner or something like that.
Good stuff. I think we have time for one more question. No? Oh, yes.
What are some society-wide or industry-specific, whichever way you want to look at it, cultural and social barriers to AI development, and do you think AI has the potential to solve some of the problems it creates?
I'm happy to
You
do
stumped him on that one.
a quick answer to that, and we'd love to see if the other panelists have some responses to that. I think there's clearly bias in a lot of these models baked into the training data that's selected to use to train some of these models. I think better training data selection can help to better ensure that the outputs of these models are more equitable and fair. I think we can also add guardrails post-model creation to ensure that there's some measure of fairness and equitability in terms of the outcomes, especially for things like human health or even things like determining mortgages that are greenlit from banks, for example. I think there needs to be probably a bit more thought and oversight about who is providing input into the models that are developed, especially on the open source side. In the closed source side, I think it's a little harder to determine who are the constituents who are making the models and making the determinations. I think, unfortunately, the skill set of the AI whisperer, or basically the model alchemist, as I've heard them called, is a very, very rare skill set. It's basically, it's almost intuitive of how to shift the weights around in the model, and like, there's almost like an art and science to it. So I think if we can grow the number of people who have that skill set, teach the next generation, make sure that they represent a broader portion of society, I think that's going to be useful. That's my quick response.
Good stuff. Well, I think we're at the end. Leigh Marie and Shawn and John, thank you so much. And thank you to our hosts, Craft Ventures and Miami Hack Week. I think, stand up, sit down. I'll stand up.
All right. Did everybody have a good time? All right, sweet. So, I mean, we're going to wrap, like, we're basically finished. Just like next steps, we are going to be heading over to Freehold Miami, open bar happy hour. If you have a wristband, that will get you inside. Also, before we go, you guys might be wondering, where are we? This space is called The Canvas. The team is here. They are basically an experiential store that you can come into. So, you know, while you're here for Tech Week, feel free to come back on any other days to check out The Canvas. We'll have their social up on the screen just after this. And again, like a huge thank you to Craft and the entire team there, my squad from Miami Hack Week. Yeah, so head over to the Freehold. Here's the address. It's literally just like a street